everyone, this is Tyler Johnson. We're back with Grinder in the Box Build Part 2. Sorry we were a little delayed. We had a little incident with the cameraman broke his arm, so it kind of put us a little behind on our planned project here. But we're back, we're ready to start going on to the next process. Last time we left with the last video, we had unboxed everything, just talked about general principles of the grinder, and we were getting ready to clean it up. So when I left you last, I was going to clean everything up and get ready for paint. As you can see, I put it together right here just to give everybody a view of what it's going to kind of look like, just a pre-assembly. Hasn't been painted yet. When I was cleaning up the parts, the thing that you're going to notice is there's a lot of rough edges from the laser cutting. Laser cutting doesn't leave a nice smooth surface. I made the decision that I wanted a nice smooth surface. I kind of wanted to make it look as nice as possible. So I have a small multi-tool grinder on my Delta bench grinder that I utilize to grind it all down and get those rough spots off. It was a lot of work. Ultimately, I don't know if it was necessary or not. One thing I do want to mention, if you decide to grind it down, pay real close attention to grinding the opening for your tool arm slots, because if you grind those down too much, you're going to open your slot up. So I stayed away from the interior of those to make sure I didn't open my slot up too much and cause some slop in the tool arms. So again, I don't know if it was necessary. I probably, if I were to do it again, I wouldn't take the time out and do it. It was a lot of work, like I said, and really it's just an aesthetics thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to this first part of the assembly. And what I kind of plan to do is treat the motor plate and the base plate as a sub-assembly. The reason I'm going to do this is because during the build, you're going to need to transfer your hole locations to the bottom of this motor plate, tap them, screw the motor plate into the base plate into the motor plate, and that will form the basis of the rest of the grinder, obviously. I've chosen to do it a little different. I'm going to do both. I'm going to use screws in the motor plate, base plate sub-assembly, but then I'm also going to go ahead and put a weld in there too at the junction of the base plate and the motor plate. The reason I'm going to do this is just I really want a rock solid foundation. I'm going to go kind of overkill on it. The thing is I have a small 110 MIG gas welder. So for those of you that know welding, it's really not a lot of welder to weld half-inch plate, so I'm not going to rely 100% on this weld. I'm going to have to make multiple passes with it, and it's just going to be some extra insurance over just the bolts. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and we'll break down here, we'll get this all apart, and we'll start moving on to the next step of the process, which will be making the sub-assembly of the motor plate and the base plate. Okay, here we're back. We've got everything taken apart. Like I said, we're going to go over the motor plate and the base plate as a sub-assembly. Also, before I started this, I started collecting all the fasteners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a list together of all the fasteners. I'll attach it to the video here so you guys know what to expect. There's some choices to make here when you're talking about fasteners, especially for the bottom of the motor plate. You're going to have to countersink those to make everything nice and flat. In the instructions on Jamie's website, on Polar Bear Forge website, it shows using a countersink screw. I actually prefer a socket head type screw myself. I think it's a little more secure. It's kind of a looks thing for me too. So the difference is going to be that you're going to have to come up with a little bit of tooling to get this job done. You're going to need some taps. You're also going to need either a counter bore. If you're going to use the socket head screw, you're going to need a counter bore. I like to use piloted counter bores. This one's a pretty nice one I got from an industrial tool supply. It's pretty expensive, but it's going to last me a long time. And that'll give you the right size for your socket head. Or you can use something like a counter sink with the angled sides, and that will handle your countersink screws if you decide to do countersink screws. Also, throughout the build, I decided to use pretty much all Allen heads. I'm going to use button heads for a lot of the assembly. I'm going to go ahead and try out this shoulder bolt for the actual idle arm to see how that works out. It's just, again, it's a matter of preference. It's just, I kind of like the look. It makes it look like a machine to me. So it's up to you. You guys can use regular bolts. It just doesn't matter. Whatever's available at your hardware store is going to work out well for you. So we're going to move on to getting this set up to transfer the marks for the holes and get them tapped. So be right back. Okay, we're going to get started. I'm not going to walk you through every little thing. I'll explain the general concept. For most of you, I think you're probably going to get it. Probably already know how to tap things. For those of you that don't, I suggest you look some stuff up on the internet and figure out how to do it. It's worth investing in some decent taps and the proper drill size, the drill bit size for what you're going to be using. For instance, this is going to be a 1/4 20 we're going to be using here, so I'm going to need a 1/4 20 tap and the appropriate tap drill size that goes along with that. One important thing is they've got marked top on your motor plate, so make sure that goes to the top. And then when you install your motor plate, and this is on that instruction site on Jamie's website, polarbearforge.com. It's really important, if you notice how it's going to move around a little bit, and if you just rely on that, you're not going to get it nice and parallel and square, or actually square. So for me, what I'm going to use, you could use a piece of angle iron in there or something, but I'm going to use welding triangles to get a nice, good square setup. And then once I do that, and I'm pretty confident it's square, I'm going to go ahead and use my machinist square, and I'm going to double check square here. So, and my little setup is kind of tough, so you could do something like this and check square before we start. And that looks pretty good. I'm looking pretty square here. So, all right. So the next part of the process is we need to actually mark the holes for the motor plate, and for that you can use, one method is you could use a drill, put it in your drill motor, and you'll take a little divot out and it'll mark everything perfectly. What I'm going to use is basically a transfer punch, and this is a 17/64 transfer punch that fits the holes perfect. Just slide it right on in, take your ball peen, just nice light taps. Oops, that one's not fitting. I'll go down a level here. That one's still a little tight too. Okay, and that should give us some nice, clear marks. Yep. Alright, as you can see, I went ahead and marked these with black marker so you can see. There's your holes. You got your same holes in back. So we're going to need to drill those and get them ready for tapping. Okay, we're getting ready to drill. I've set up in my vise the motor plate, so make sure it's nice and square. If you don't have this type of setup on your drill press, you can use some angle iron. You can use welding squares. Just make sure you get it on the table straight. If you don't have a drill press yet, it's going to be a pretty critical tool. You might want to make sure you get one. So I'm all set up. I've got a number 7 drill. That's a tap body drill for a 1/4 20, and I'm going to go ahead and make my holes. And I'm not going to show you every single one. I'll just do one as an example, and then we'll move on. Little cutting fluid. Running this about 1,000 RPM. Nice and slow. Alright, so I'll go ahead and get all these drilled out, and we'll be back in a few. Okay, we got all the holes drilled in the motor plate. Next process is going to be tapping them out. We're going to be using a 1/4 20 tap. If you remember, I used a number 7 drill. It's a 201 drill. That's the correct body size for a 1/4 20. I've gone ahead and put my tap in my tap handle. You guys all should know how to tap. If not, like I said, go ahead and look some of that up on the internet and watch some of that stuff. It's a pretty simple process. I do have the ability to power tap with my drill press, but I don't like to do it too much on dead-end holes, because if you lose track of where you are and you drive that into the bottom, you're going to snap the tap off. Even with a tap handle, you got to be really careful and take this really slow. You don't want to break it off. It's going to be a really big pain to get that back out if you break it off in there. So what we'll do is we'll start tapping. I put a little fluid on, a little cutting fluid in there, and just try to start real slow. You want to be as perpendicular as possible and just start off really slow. Again, if you already know how to do this, you know, just fast forward through it. This is for people that haven't done this before. So start driving that tap down nice and slow, and then what I like to do is I like to back it off just a little bit, bring it out. That brings the chips back out a little bit, and it helps you cut a little easier. So take this nice and slow. Don't rush this job. You don't want to deal with a broken tap. They're very difficult to get out. So, okay, we'll be back in a few. Okay, we're back, and we just finished tapping the holes in the motor plate. Now we're going to move on to counter boring the holes from the underneath to accept the socket head screws I'm going to be using. Again, remember you can also do it with counter sunk screws as well. My choice is going to be the socket head, so it doesn't matter either way, whatever your preference is at this point. Okay, so I've got the plate set up on the drill press. I've got my counter bore installed on the press. I've already lined everything up. I've already pre-measured how deep I'm going to go. I'm going to use my depth gauge on the drill press. A little bit of cutting fluid. With counter boring, you're going to want to use a pretty good amount of cutting fluid just to kind of keep everything cool. Reduce the wear on your tool. Sometimes I go a little overboard with it, but it's better too much than not enough. And that's it. I've already done the other 4. So we're going to move on to installing the base plate onto the motor plate. Okay, we finished countersinking the last holes, or counterboring the last holes. You want to make sure the last thing you need to do to this plate is go ahead and tap out your holes for your mounting plate for your motor. And I used 1/4-20 on all these, and I just got all 6 tapped out real quick before we move on to installing the plate onto the motor plate. Okay. Basically, the final step in this process is we've got to go ahead and install the motor plate onto the base plate. So remember, it's marked top. You can see it up here. You're probably not going to be able to see it on the video, but it's clearly marked top. And since I've got it upside down in my vise here, I got to make sure I put it on right. And then it's just a simple matter. I'm using some 1/4-20 1-inch socket cap Allen screws to go ahead and install this plate. I'm going to run all 4 screws down tight, a little Loctite if you want, just make sure everything's secure. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over, and I'll start doing my welding spots. I'll probably weld about 4 good 1-inch welds all the way down on each side. Like I said before, it's going to take me a little bit of time because I've got a smaller welder, so I'm going to have to do multiple passes, but I really want this to be secure and permanent so it doesn't ever come apart on me and it stays nice and rigid. That's about it for the first subassembly, for the motor plate subassembly. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and paint it up and get it ready for the next step. And as soon as I get that done, I'll get the next video shot, and it'll basically be putting the rest of it together. I'll also try to get a fastener list that I used up as soon as possible as well. Alright, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Bye.